Forza Motorsport as a prime title has been dormant for a while, leaving Forza Horizon, the series' troubled, tantrum-throwing brother, to magnificently somehow turn into a child protege, at least when it comes to absolutely zipping hilarity and fun and chaos. While other games like GT and Assetto Corsa and F1 hold on to the high-tech, more sim-styled racing genre, each with their own problems and positives. Forza Motorsport is returning. 500 plus vehicles, more than 800 upgrades, a new career system, a complete rehaul of the engine for ray trace lighting during the races, more wheel support than ever before, and of course, Turn 10's physics department level scanning of the racetrack so every bump and groove feels as close to the real thing as possible, so you need to sit on a hemorrhoid pillow for 2 days afterward. Listen, not a lot of this is going to be surprising. Forza has so many titles, and racing as a genre does as well, that at some point we can't argue anymore about which game feels the best. Instead, it's the sides, a complimentary appetizer that can come along and make the entire meal something to remember. Does this title have it? We're going to check it out and see. And as we pour one out for those who've come and gone, let's grab another bottle to celebrate the return of the great. The new racing team ACG needs your help. Subscribe and hit the notify all button. We got 2 podcasts weekly, plus reviews for Mirage, Alan Wake 2, Spider-Man 2, hopefully Lords of the Fallen, and even more. Forza Motorsport, it's not a small game. Even diving in right from the start, the content is pretty mind-blowing, from cars to tracks to options, as it throws you into a number of tutorials and introduces you to the new upgrade system, basically tying experience for the cars into the actual level upgrades as well. To level up, you take over those cars, you go on races, and for whatever you do in the races, you get points, and as they go up, you're able to unlock more of the actual upgrades for each car. I admit, it does feel off. You become accustomed to it, but doing a race or two just to be told that you can put some rims on a car feels a little bit odd, with levels of unlocks being announced at the end of the races, for example, cooling, wheels, and performance. It can also ruin a bit of that amazing feeling of saving up for a specific car and having enough money left over to outfit it the way you want from the get-go, because you burned 400 laps in another car you loved, but it's time to move on. And that cycle that repeated was really an excellent carrot at the end of a stick. What that can result in as you continue to play is a feeling that that cycle is a bit truncated, stopped a little bit by that upgrade system. Who knows, maybe it'll grow on me. I'm going to talk about it in a bit in more detail. One thing that is stellar here is the almost overpowering assist systems for deaf, colorblind, or just new and unskilled drivers alike. And that lets players add assists for cornering, steering, gas, braking, shifting, pretty much everything. By the way, it has so many that yes, you can actually set them all on, give it a little bit of gas, and do well in some races. I tested that out. There's one place that I actually thought I liked this improvement. I can ask anyone who's never driven to try out a racing game, turn on some of these assists and let them tear ass around, and turn up the difficulty as they continue to play, just to let people jump in. Sim and sim-light racing games can have almost fearsome entry for a lot of gamers. Will it adjust or at least affect that upgrade system, especially with people just taking advantage of it? We'll have to see. But I started ripping. Hitting tracks, adjusting the large numbers of settings in the advanced free race editor, throwing rainstorms, thunder, hot summer nights at the game's engine, taking it down in old Blackwings, Porsches, Imprezas, and everything. And after more than 24 hours, I can attest this is a racing game. That may sound flippant, but it's not. Take into account that Forza Motorsport, while a refresh, is still in the same style of game as the past titles. Throw in some music as you sedately look through your different cars in the showroom and decide between rear, front, or all-wheel drive, paint your car in the livery editor, take some flashy pics, or just drive around in the various career modes. There is very little to actually surprise here, and that's fine. If you suddenly got a surprising racing game, it would most likely prove things had gone woefully wrong, especially in the sim and sim-light spots. So far, every car I've got feels discrete in a way that's defined by the basic platform and then adding more and more to it, raising the performance metrics of the car to go up and down classes. Once you finally get deeper into the upgrades, the game really does actually unlock and feel like it's a little bit more accessible, but that first bit especially just seems slower than I remember the prior games. Regardless of those issues, it does actually have cross-save, which lets you leap from PC to Xbox if you want to at pretty much any time. When it comes to the audio, which is so important for games like this, it's pretty good so far. The number of cars is huge, so testing even a small sample set is a difficult endeavor. And in racing games, you sort of need that sweet hotness pouring in through the inside of a car as you're twisting across an S-turn. It can end up informing the driver of a great deal about what's going on. When it comes to the voice, there's a huge number of tutorials that you can listen to somebody explain the different ways in which you enter tours, different ways that you can set up races, and just the different ways you can set up the cars. There's a lot here for anybody new and old. I jumped into the systems for control. You have your gamepad, mouse, and keyboard if you wanted to do that on your PC, but you also, of course, have steering wheels The number of different settings you can do is about what you would expect for a sim light title. I think that there's probably more adjustments that maybe some of the sim specialists would want here, but I think for people who are diving in, there's enough there at least right now. And they do have a good amount of wheel support. I'll get into some exacts a little bit later on in a second. But let's talk about the graphics. It's so important in racing games. Everybody is always expecting those quality graphics. The Series X has a quality mode that's 30 FPS with ray tracing throughout all of it. I didn't want to do that one because 30 FPS. They do have a performance ray tracing mode that seems to be about the best, and it offers ray tracing on almost everything. Now, the cars are detailed as hell, and while you can dive into them in the photo mode, of course, the best place is just fighting through sharp turn traffic, blasting out of the corners, and being able to guess every single car, even in visibility poor situations, by some setup that they've got on the rear end. It's modeled well, but I don't feel it was as notable or noticeable as I expected, regardless of the setting that I actually put it on. This is something that a lot of people are probably going to look at and break down to decide exactly what level of detail the destruction is occurring on. But for me, I noticed it felt a little less kinetic than I was hoping for. You have the typical camera, of course, far, bumper, hood, cockpit, driver, chase, and chase far. Performance-wise on the Series X, the game holds up very well, even with heavy rain, fog, 24 racers on the busier tracks. I did notice a couple stutters in the replay, but it was very rare. There's also some issues that they are patching up in the next day or so that is going to include fixing up some low geometry characters on race sides during the replay. I promised a bit more of that discussion about the wheel support, and it's pretty vast, but it's missing SC Pro, SimSports, VRS. It supports direct AP though, so you should be able to get some workarounds there. Force feedback so far has been fine, but with so many wheels, this one is going to have to go live for everyone to jump into and parse down exactly what wheel they have, what settings they want to use. Forza touts improved force feedback as a point of data, but doesn't really dive into what it is, and it's been a long time since I returned to a Forza Prime type title like this, so to tell you the truth, it feels like it works right now, but the finesse and the discreteness is going to take a great deal of time for me to identify if it's really working the way I would like. It did end up informing me as exactly it should, and it was fairly strong. What is a little bit odd, sometimes strong, sometimes weak, is the AI. There's been a ton of talk here about machine learning and so on. One thing to remember is that machine learning and training is indeed taking into account racers' histories, putting that data into the learning set as well as the track data, and then letting the system train itself. There's a lot of talk about how the racers react more realistically and sometimes with less aggressiveness, but can make their own mistakes. It feels more realistic, like those behind the driver's seat are a combination of thousands of hours of telemetry and race tape, little mini humans in split seconds regurgitating everything they've learned to take a corner when neck and neck with another driver. Being able to use that against them has also paid off. Going into a race, for example, with a new car isn't just about you. It's about knowing the track and the car in front of you. Maybe you've spent hours with that car and you know that it needs just a bit more brake time than you do, and you can use that against them every single time to creep up to first place. But it does at times feel very antiseptic, like when a hospital turns into a representation of heaven in a movie and things just look a little too pristine that they're scary. You can adjust this, which is excellent, so I decided to test it and just go nuts. Meet the Jalopy 2000. I smashed, trashed, and rolled into everyone I could. The only thing I didn't do was go backwards. Oh wait, yeah, I did. And they're pretty sticky regardless of the settings. Regardless of what you put the AI on, they do have a tendency to stick pretty much to their track race areas, and there were times where it felt like there was some physics helping them out. Well, I get the idea, which is to go away from the drive-atar chaos where friends had trained their drivers to enact Shoemaker-Levy levels of chaos and collisions on the track. Does offer a more trained interaction, which is great for a lot of people, where at least for the most part, so far, I haven't noticed any random pileups caused by someone just deciding if 90 degrees can be turned into 0 degrees for the hell of it. Exactly what you would expect with some changes. No real surprises, just like many other career racing games. Well, again, except for maybe that career system itself, but I'm going to just have to keep diving in. What is odd to me is that while this is the 13th game total in the total franchise, I didn't know if I wanted to jump into another racer. However, all last night and the day before and this morning, I kept thinking to myself, you know what, just one more race, testing out a car here or there, jumping into a vehicle I've never driven before, or just to see if a familiar one still felt that way. And that brings me to the experience and fun and what I got out of the game, at least so far. And while the majority is in the middle, let me describe two bits. When Forza is at its best is when you're racing for a while, a bit of track knowledge under your belt, and you slip between two crumple zones on wheels as you enter a turn, and then as you exit, you cut inside when no one expects, except for that jackass behind you who had the same idea. And now it's a sprint. Everyone's floored. You're sweating the next corner, which is creeping up way faster than it feels like it should. And somehow you slip into the front, leaving the rest to figure out physics and how it works when you pull away. The feeling of knowing the environment and returning it back into a race variable and thus success is awesome. But when Forza is at its worst for me is the grind for the new car experience. I'm sorry, I do not like it. Each car is different, so attaching experience to the car is fine in theory, but it means a lot of retreaded races. So the experience that should somewhat translate from one to the other isn't really. It's going to be a very contentious subject, and it's not like odd leveling systems haven't or don't exist in a lot of games. Arguments could be made that due to how it works, it's nice to be able to respec your car like an 8-cylinder Geralt, just throwing different stats in new places. And that's awesome. It just refunds those points back to you. And that leaves me with the general thought that motorsport is a bit hit and miss. It's a bit uneven. For every moment that I liked and the ability to get newer people into it and jumping into some of these cars and driving around, which is just awesome, it felt like it was missing a number of things. For example, it's not really got a lot of tracks, and I'm sure we're going to see these parsed out to keep our interest high as the months after months of release spread out like amateur race times. But I would have liked to have seen even more Moment 1. And I would say that the damage system is not as robust as I would like. However, we have seen an increase in the graphics, and their attention to detail in those parts, especially if you've liked them, is spot on. The great thing about this is it's going to be on Steam. It's also on Game Pass, so a person can jump in if they want for $15, play the game, see if they like it, and then decide if they want to get that premium edition or something like that, get some extra cars, get some extra skins, whatever they give in those. I just wish there was a little bit more, and I wish it felt just a little bit more even. Speaking of even, there's even more content coming up. We got Alan Wake, we've got Spider-Man 2, and Assassin's Creed Mirage, plus the 2 podcasts. Wednesday's podcast will dive deeper into this game as well as many others. The deep dives, the thoughts, the opinions, the ideas of it. It's just 3-4 of us sitting down talking about games. It's not an influencer-filled podcast, so if you don't like those kind of things, jump in, hang out with some friends. We do the same thing on Friday. You're going to see a bunch of reviews from me, previews, impressions as well. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed these impressions. Gang, gang.